Hi there, welcome to the latest of Napthens Brief Conversations. My name is Malcolm Ireland. I head up Leisure and Licensing at Napthens. I'm here with my partner, Oliver McCann. Oliver, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, as Malcolm says, I'm Oliver McCann. I'm a partner in the employment team, advising businesses of all shapes and sizes, but particularly a lot of businesses in the leisure and hospitality sector.
Thanks, Ol. And today we're going to have a general conversation, very laid back and informal, about what we're seeing a couple of weeks after lockdown has been eased in leisure and hospitality. All employment, flexible furlough, I think that's probably something that's been on a lot of people's minds. What are you seeing? Are most people back? Are most people not back? What's the general trend?
I think just before the lockdown was eased to allow sort of customers back into sort of pubs, restaurants, etc., and there's a lot of hesitancy from our clients as to how they would know what the staffing numbers should be to deal with demand. Obviously, there was an anticipated peak for the weekend that lockdown was eased, but it was more what's going to happen thereafter. Is this trade going to carry on at the level, or is it going to drop off when reality sets in that people are worried about COVID-19? So the biggest concern has been, what can we do to staff the service needs of the business properly? How do we get the numbers correct? And but for the flexible furlough scheme, which the government introduced and which was effective the 1st of July, the businesses in leisure and hospitality would have struggled, because the feedback I'm getting from clients is that it's hit and miss, really. Some days they're really busy, some days they're quiet, and some days they're mediocre. But being able to compare to their sort of usual covers as it was this time last year is just impossible. So they end up having to sometimes phone staff at last minute, asking them to come in. Sometimes they have to send staff back home because there's not enough work to give them. And that's doable. That's the good thing, is that is doable as long as you've got staff that are cooperative. And secondly, because the flexible furlough scheme basically says you only have to pay the staff for the hours they actually work, and the hours that they don't work, which they would usually work, they can be furloughed. So that's helped out massively. But clients are now thinking, well, what's going to happen in October, at the end of October, if things carry on as they currently are, which is just uncertainty of demand on their service.
And I think you're probably right in the sense a lot of the variables. So I had conversations after the first weekend of lockdown easing, when the pubs were open again. I had conversations with staff that were saying they were thrilled with how busy they were and everything's going to be fine. I had others that were devastated, saying, I've got a real problem here. And my feeling is that it's too early to tell. In the first couple of weeks of it being eased, there are too many variables in play to be able to say this is what it looks like for the next few months. You've got, certainly there's an indication that the grey pound, so to speak, the older generations, particularly the generations that would spend a lot of time in the pub, they're avoiding the pub, they're cautious. There's also kind of the pent-up demand, and nobody can really tell, I don't think, when some of that's going to come back or when some of that's going to go away. I think you're probably talking 6 to 8 weeks after lockdown started easing that we can start saying this is probably the normal that we're looking at for the next few months, which, whilst there might be some difficult decisions to be made, will probably tie in quite well with the furlough scheme coming to an end.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully. I think you're right. It's very uncertain. We're still seeing sort of peak areas with COVID-19 infections increasing, which doesn't sort of help customer confidence. So that's a bit of an issue with the Leicester lockdown. Our other local areas are going to get locked down shortly, and that doesn't help businesses when they're trying to rebuild. But perhaps, if we can get to September, when the schools go back, and once the schools are, the children are back at school and college, etc., that sort of sense of normality starts to build back into people's lives. Perhaps then they'll start sort of having that confidence to get back into dining out and going out for a drink. But only time will tell. It's that uncertainty that we have.
Are you seeing a lot in terms of, because again, one of the big question marks that I've spoken to a couple of people about, when people haven't been working for, say, 3 months, are you seeing a lot of issues, performance related, with people almost trying to get back into the swing of it, or is that?
Yeah, there's been a few clients that have reported to me some difficulty in getting a handful of their staff back from furlough. Um, Primarily probably because currently some staff, who sort of have flexible hours, they're getting 80% of their wages. It's not that different to what they were earning before on a flexible basis, and they're surviving on it. And sort of they're thinking, well, I don't want to go back. Why should I put myself at risk? I'm getting paid 80% of my wage. I'll sit at home and do nothing. In fact, I've had some clients have reported that their staff have flown back off to Poland for a couple of weeks, without permission. So, it's a challenge, but the only way that an employer can really deal with that is probably to be firm with their employees that we now need them back from work, albeit on flexible furlough, and they need to be available to work the hours that we can allocate to them. And if they don't, it'll be a failure to comply with the reasonable instruction. So it's about communication with the staff, and for those staff that are resistant or not playing ball, it's about ongoing communication with them to understand what is the problem in coming back. Some will have concerns about whether it's a safe working environment. Some will be taking the mick, to put it bluntly, and some maybe sort of have disappeared off the face of the earth to go and visit family somewhere else. Who knows?
And it's interesting what you say about encouraging people back to work. I read a really interesting piece, I think in Propel, I think it was Anne Elliott, that was talking about two different experiences that she had at two different hospitality venues over the weekend. And I thought it was a really, really good point that she made, where she went to one. I'm thinking about people being cautious about coming back to work and feeling like the environment's unsafe. And the message from her was, look, it is really, really important to make your staff feel comfortable that they're in an environment where it's safe, because they are your front line and they're communicating to your customers. And if your staff don't feel safe and they feel unsure, that will translate to your customers. And I think we saw stats, I can't remember the figures, but I saw stats that I think it was around about 1 in 4 adults in England went out to a licensed premises during the first weekend of lockdown easing and pubs reopening, but there was 30% plus of those that said they wouldn't hurry back. Now, I'm not sure what the reasons for that are, but I would bet my bottom dollar there's an element of that are saying it's because they didn't feel safe in the environment that they were in.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about how many sort of establishments have sort of made themselves sort of a well-respected venue, whether it's a drinking venue or an eating venue or a hotel, a lot of it boils down to customer service. So as you say, if your frontline staff aren't happy, if they're not comfortable in the role that they're performing, that's going to come through in terms of the service that they receive from the frontline staff. So it's absolutely key that you get the right staff in, to do the work that you need doing. And if anyone is genuinely concerned about their working environment being safe, it's probably better to keep them on furlough than to bring them in, because as you say, they could probably do more damage than good. This is about rebuilding customer confidence now, and the best people to do that are your staff that are comfortable in the environment that they're enjoying their experience in.
Yeah, I think it's a key message. It's a key message for staff, and it's also a key message, like you say, for the customer base. I mean, the government scheme, it'll be interesting to see whether that helps in that regard or not. I know what they're trying to do with the 50% off your meal is encourage people that are maybe not convinced it's safe back into licensed premises. Personal view, and it is only a personal view, is that that's probably a little bit mistargeted. I think the people that are really cautious and really afraid that these environments are safe, a tenner off the meal isn't going to encourage them back into the pub. So I think the people that are probably going to benefit from that are the people that already feel it is safe, and the people that are already going out. And there's probably an element in the middle that were a bit and ahhing about it, and that will tip them over the edge. But I don't think that's going to be a big element in the middle. So it'll be interesting to see if that comes to fruition.
Yeah, and actually, if you think about it, there's a real opportunity for some, for some of these, restaurants and pubs to set themselves out as being different to their competitors now. If they can create that environment which is safe for their customers, but still hopefully a enjoyable and relaxing experience, whereas other establishments can't do that, they have an opportunity here to increase their sort of customer base really over a period of time. So taking the health and safety of their staff and their customers, seriously, and communicating with the staff about what the arrangements should be in place to make everyone safe is critical, and will pay dividends if they've done it correctly.
I think you're right, and I think it's something that's probably underappreciated. There are, and again, the government has given de-restrictive regulations, and they've given some guidance, and that guidance has an awful lot of flexibility to it. It's about suggestions, not that necessarily. And again, you're always going to have this. Some authorities are treating it the way that it should be treated, as guidance. Some are treating it as law, and you're always going to get those discrepancies across different areas. But it's helpful in a way, because the government have given the premises the opportunity to work out what they think is right and what they can make work for their premises. It's unhelpful in other ways, because anything that gives flexibility gives room for argument, and that can create its own problems when you've got authorities watching with a very close eye what licensed premises are doing. But you're right, sometimes doing more. I've certainly seen some venues that are using it as a selling point, that they are doing more than anybody else, and this is definitely a safe environment that you're to be in. And as I say, I do think that's really, really important to get out to the customer base.
I mean, I went out for a meal yesterday afternoon with a better half, and we were really well looked after by the establishment. Walked in, greeted by a member of staff. They communicated the rules very clearly but friendly, escorted us to the table. Lots of hygiene all around. The way they deliver the service is more hygienic. It was just a really good experience, to the extent that I was more than happy to post on sort of Facebook and Twitter what a great meal I had in a safe environment, and all the other customers start doing exactly the same, then that establishment will become the focal point of more customers, hopefully.
Yeah, I think that's fair comment. And again, something not all people want to talk about, but a very real issue. Are you seeing a lot of enquiries, sector specific or otherwise, around redundancy? Are people looking forward and saying that this is something that's going to rear its head? And I suppose that ties in with the government's bonus scheme for employees that you take back off furlough. How active is it in people's minds at the minute?
I think it's made businesses stop and think about sort of making redundancies. But if I'm being honest, at this point in time, only being less than 2 weeks into the reopening of leisure and hospitality venues, it's too early to see whether or not that retention bonus will make any difference. And what is going to be the real test is what's the customer demand. Let's say by the end of August. Has that improved to an extent that we can avoid redundancies, or does it look like the demand isn't at the levels that it's going to need to be, in which case we need to shed staff at some stage to avoid the cost that comes with it, bearing in mind that sort of the furlough scheme ends at the end of October, and if you have obligations to give notice to terminate employment, you don't want to be doing that once the furlough scheme has ended and you're paying full cost for it. You're better doing it before the furlough scheme ends, so that people are serving notice whilst on furlough, and you're getting some of that cost funded by the government. So decisions will be made certainly late August by a lot of of our clients in the leisure and hospitality sector. I've got a client that runs a hotel. They've closed one hotel, kept the other open, and they're going to see what the occupancy levels are like by the end of August. And if they're not at the level they need to be, they'll then start their plan to implement a staff headcount reduction, which will be devastating, really, but essential if that business is going to survive.
Yeah, and it's I suppose that's sort of the theme right the way through. It's at the moment what we've got is a whole load of unknowns. It's a situation that we've never been in before. The word unprecedented has been used an awful lot, but quite rightly so. It's very, very difficult in a situation that nobody's seen before to predict what the outcome is. I think if there's one thing that this sector has always been able to do, it's been to adapt and it's to innovate. It's something that it's proven itself capable of doing time and time again. And I think that the other positive, so to speak, I was speaking to somebody in the pub on Sunday, and he was saying, in his view, he thinks anybody that does sort of face-to-face sales or that kind of role that relies on face-to-face, there's going to be some real job sacrifices going on in that area, because people have got used to a different way of living and a different way of buying. And I pointed out to him that you could say exactly the same about hospitality, except he was sat in a pub eating a meal. You know, people haven't been able to do that for 3 or 4 months, and yet here we are within a couple of weeks of being able to doing it. So this sector has come through world wars and all sorts of other things, and it survived it, and it has repeatedly brought itself back up to flourish. It'll do it again.
Yeah, well, we're all social beings, aren't we? You know, and as social beings, we want to socialise, and so leisure and hospitality provides us the perfect opportunity to do that. It's just sort of being able to do it in a safe way, you know, and hopefully.
And we like beer.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And as COVID-19 disappears, you know, that demand will come back. It's just sort of riding the storm, so to speak, you know, for those that can.